Hello and welcome to this Faber members poetry event. My name is Lavinia Singer and I work on the poetry list here at Faber. At the time of the UK's National Poetry Day last year, we hosted a showcase event at Bloomsbury Theatre in the heart of literary London. This year, we find ourselves in rather different circumstances, and I know for many of us, poetry has been an anchor and mainstay throughout. The benefit, however, of our shift to the online is that we can bring together many more people from far and wide. Indeed, we have 4 poets who will be reading for us across 3 time zones, 2 established stars of this year, and 2 whose glittering collections will be published in the first half of 2021. The poets will give a short introduction before reading from their collections, so I'll just give a few words to welcome each and to outline the running order. First will be Natalie Diaz, whose post-colonial love poem is a Poetry Book Society recommendation and shortlistee for the Forward Prize for Best Collection. The New York Times Book Review heralds it as one of the most important poetry releases in years, The Guardian as a radical political act, while the book jacket describes an anthem of desire against erasure, which is just what it is. In the face of a nation's violent, destructive history, which sadly is not post, as the title speaks to, there can yet be defiant, hopeful, and healing connection between physical bodies, bodies of land, and the bodies of language here employed so magnificently. Natalie will be joining us from the Mojave Valley, Arizona. Many will be familiar with Barbara Kingsolver's popular prize-winning fiction. It might be a discovery to learn of her recent collection of poetry, How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons. Selected as the Observer's Poetry Book of the Month, it is a glorious and generous gathering. Its interwoven sections lead us through playful life lessons, confessional meditations and elegies, the challenges of being a writer, alongside laments for and honouring of the natural world. What seems particularly special is the intimacy and open-heartedness born in the poems. They feel truly revelatory. Barbara will be recording from her farm in southern Appalachia, sadly not outdoors as it was threatening rain. We'll be publishing Ricardo Phillips's Living Weapon this January, and it's the first publication in the UK by this award-winning author, academic and journalist. As its title suggests, the book is potent, piercing and thrilling, written in response to the latent aggressions that threaten to detonate at any point in the life of a black man, especially in the United States. But it is also a wise and graceful celebration of what it is to be living. Through allegory, philosophy, and musicality, these are timeless and timely lyrics of erudition and survival. As the Los Angeles Review of Books acknowledged, despite every reason not to, he sings. Rowan will be singing or reading for us from the Berkshires in Williamstown, Massachusetts. The title of Needy Zach Aria Ipes' debut poetry collection, published next July, is still to be settled, but what I can confirm is that it is a spellbinding exploration of love and the wounds it makes. Its first half has 5 sections, each corresponding to the 5 arrows of Karma, the Hindu god of love, desire, and memory. We see the effect each arrow has on some body and its particular journey of love. The second half is a long narrative poem, A is for Arabs, which follows a different kind of journey, a family of refugees who have fled to the West from conflict in an unspecified Middle Eastern country. Its structure is a sophisticated yoking of abecedarian and Fibonacci sequences, yes, you heard that right, to create an unforgettable account of migration and exile, of home and belonging. Needy will be joining us from her home in Dublin, over on the north side, by the Botanic Gardens. And so I will pass over to our wonderful poets now. Thank you for joining us and for being part of this special Faber members poetry celebration.
Iwanja hotank ivak idum, hokulo imanch, Natalie Inmoik. My name is Natalie Diaz, and I'm going to share a few poems with you from my collection, Postcolonial Love Poem. From the Desire Field. I don't call it sleep anymore. I'll risk losing something new instead, like you lost your rosen moon, shook it loose. But sometimes when I get my horns in a thing, a wonder, a grief, or a line of her, it is a sticky and ruined fruit to unfasten from, despite my trembling. Let me call my anxiety desire then. Let me call it a garden. Maybe this is what Lorca meant when he said verde, que te quiero verde. Because when the shade of night comes, I am a field of it, of any worry ready to flower in my chest. My mind in the dark is una bestia, unfocused, hot, and if not yoked to exhaustion beneath the hip and plow of my lover, then I am another night wandering the desire field, bewildered in its low green glow, belling the meadow between midnight and morning. Insomnia is like spring that way, surprising and many-petaled, the kick and leap of gold grasshoppers at my brow. I am struck in the witched hours of want. I want her green life, her inside me in a green hour I can't stop. Green vein in her throat, green wing in my mouth, green thorn in my eye. I want her like a river goes, bending, green, moving, moving. Fast as that, this is how it happens. Soy una sonambula. And even though you said today you felt better, and it is so late in this poem, is it okay to be clear, to say, I don't feel good, to ask you to tell me a story about the sweet grass you planted, and tell it again or again until I can smell its sweet smoke, leave this thrashed field and be smooth? Catching copper. My brothers have a bullet. They keep their bullet on a leash, shiny as a whip of blood. My brothers walk their bullet with a limp, a clipped hip bone. My brother's bullet is a math head, is all geometry. From a distance is just a bee and its sting. Like a bee, you should see my brother's bullet make a comb by chewing holes in what is sweet. My brothers lose their bullet all the time. When their bullet takes off on them, their bullet leaves a hole. My brothers search their houses for their bullet, and a little red ghost moans. Eventually, my brothers call out, here, bullet, here. Their bullet comes running, buzzing. Their bullet always comes back to them. When their bullet comes back to them, their bullet leaves a hole. My brothers are too slow for their bullet because their bullet is in a hurry and wants to get the lead out. My brother's bullet is dressed for a red carpet in a copper jacket. My brothers tell their bullet, careful you don't hurt somebody with all that flash. My brothers kiss their bullet in a dark cul-de-sac in front of the corner store ice machine, in the passenger seat of their car, on a strobe-lighted dance floor. My brother's bullet kisses them back. My brothers break and dance for their bullet, the jerk, the stanky leg, they pop, lock, and drop for their bullet, a move that has them writhing on the ground. The worm, my brothers call it. My brothers go all worm for their bullet. My brother's bullet is registered, is a bullet of letters, has a PD, a CIB, a GSW if they are lucky, an EMT, if not, a 999, a DNR, a DOA. My brothers never call the cops on their bullet and instead pledge allegiance to their bullet with hands over their hearts and stomachs and throats. My brothers say they would die for their bullet. If my brothers die, their bullet would be lost. If my brothers die, there's no bullet to begin with. The bullet is for living brothers. My brothers feed their bullet the way the bulls fed Zeus, burning on a pyre their own thigh bones wrapped in fat. My brothers take a knee, bow against the asphalt, prostrate on the concrete for their bullet. We wouldn't go so far as to call our bullet a prophet, my brothers say. But my brother's bullet is always lit like a night church. It makes my brothers holy. You could say my brother's bullet cleans them, the way red ants wash the empty white bowl of a dead coyote's eye socket. Yes, my brother's bullet cleans them, makes them ready for God.
Thanks, Lavinia, and thanks, Faber, for putting such a beautiful jacket on my book. This is a passion project for me. I have always loved poetry, even though as a writer, I'm mostly known as a novelist. And that's because I figured out a really long time ago that people will actually pay you to write novels. So novelist became my day job. And for these 30 years that I've been writing, that's mainly how I've supported my family and kept a roof over our heads. But poetry always has mattered to me very much. I've always loved poetry. And in recent years, as the world became unrecognizably strange and alienated and just scary, I have turned to poetry more and more, both as a reader and as a writer, because of the way it can wake up my brain and calm it down at the same time. And so it occurred to me sometime in the middle of last year that these might be the times into which I could offer a kind of relief package to readers in the form of poetry, something comforting in difficult times. Little did we know it would be these times. Nobody expected COVID-19. So I'm offering up these poems in the hope that they might help you find grace in unexplored corners of your life, in family and friendships, and even in loss, in the many ways that grief expands our experience of life. I hope that in these poems you'll find some communion with the human condition in times when community is harder to find. I hope you'll find some unexpected ways to fly, or at least to lighten up a little, because no matter how terrible things seem, they could actually be worse. And that's the subject of the first poem I'm going to read, which is How to Survive This. Oh, misery, imperfect universe of days stretched out ahead, the string of pearls and drops of venom on the web, losses of heart, of life and limb, news of the worst. Remind me again, the day will come when I look back amazed at the waste of sorry salt, when I had no more than this to cry about. Now I lay me down. I'm not there yet. You might notice in my reading a recurring motif of how-to poems. There's a whole section at the beginning of the book. The first section is all how-to poems. But please don't turn to this book as a manual if you need to fix your leaky faucet or your carburetor. It will, however, these poems will help you if you're looking to know how to do absolutely nothing, how to be thankful for a broken leg, and of course, how to fly. And because I've chosen for this reading today a selection of pandemic appropriate poems, I was thinking this might be useful for those of us who have put on some pandemic pounds. This is How to Lose That Stubborn Weight. Follow this simple program. Examine your elbow, the small bones in your wrist. Kiss what you can. Gather up all the magazines and catalogs in your house, those hungry girls in expensive clothes. Put them all inside your refrigerator. Next, your streaming videos and discreetly altered friends. Balance these in a pile on your bathroom scale. Leave them there for 16 weeks. See how the weight melts away from the craven core. Listen. All God's children got this yearn, and half of them wish they could look just about like you do now. And so will you if you ever get to be 90. That photo that set you off today, how you'll wish you'd taken more, back when your skin still held the shape of a lusty animal you forgot to love. Wish you'd hung mirrors on all your walls and halls, and oh hell, the fat blue indifferent sky in praise of this body you had one time when everything still worked. Finally, I'm going to go back to a how-to poem. This one's about hope, because hope is something we all need right now. We all need it always, and it seems sometimes to be in short supply. But what I want to tell you is that hope is a duty. It's not something you just have, that you're born with. It's something you do. And when it starts to stall out at the end of a day, you just have to figure out how to keep it running like an engine. And so this is my poem, How to Be Hopeful. Look, you might as well know this device is going to take endless repair. Rubber cement, rubber bands, tapioca, the square of the hypotenuse, 19th century novels, sunrise, any of these could be helpful. Also feathers. The ignition is tricky. Sometimes you have to stand on an incline where things look possible, or a line you drew yourself, or the grocery line, making faces at a toddler secretly over his mother's shoulder. You may have to pop the clutch and run past the evidence, past everyone who is praying for you. Passing all previous records is okay, or passing strange, just not passing it up. Or park it and fly by the seat of your pants. With nothing in the bank, you will still want to take the express. Tiptoe past the dogs of the apocalypse, asleep in the shade of your future. Pay at the window. You'll be surprised. You can pass off hope like a bad check. You still have time, that's the thing, to make it good. Thank you.
I'm Ricardo Phillips. I'm a poet born and raised in New York. My family's from Antigua. I guess you can say I grew up in an Antiguan household in New York. And I met at some point early in my life a wonderful woman from Barcelona, and I've been spending half of my time between New York and Barcelona since then. I think that those types of intersections between the continent, the Caribbean, transatlantic in general, and the United States, particularly through my hometown of New York, infused my poetry and influenced the way in which I think about connections in literature and what tradition is. I've always read poetry. I believe that we're all born poets. We're all introduced to the world, no matter what language we speak and learn through rhythm and rhyme. And at some point, that tap is shut off. Often, mine was never shut off. And so I've gone through life trying to make sense of the world really the only way that I can, through poetry and what influences me. And really everything in poetry has influenced me in terms of finding what will suffice, right? In terms of poetry we've had in the past, and poetry which we're having now and present, and poetry which looks forward. In that sense, I'm often thinking about the way in which poetry is made of other poems, and also in the way in which, we who are living now are never really belated to the great traditions of poetry which came beforehand. There's often a sense of trying to respond to the poetry that came before, or trying to do something, different with it. My sense of it is that the poetry of the past is contemporaneous with what we're doing, that, poetic tradition, the great poems before us never really anticipated us, certainly never anticipated me. And I'm always, I suppose, in some type of agon or conversation to sing my present, looking forward, and not thinking that the past is something that I am divorced from, but rather something that I am contemporary to and making sense of. So with that in mind, I'm going to read a few poems for you. They're of different styles and lengths and tones and forms, but they all subscribe to my definition of poetry, which is a very simple one. A poem is something that sounds good, that you believe in. The rest, the technical matters, make sense for themselves through study and reading. But it's very easy to make something that sounds good that you don't believe in. It's also very easy to write something you believe in, but that doesn't sound good. A rant, for example. But that tender balance, the music of what happens, that's what poetry is. And as I always say, long live poetry. Prelude. 1. My grandmother saw it coming and left. I'd already left. It came late and swift, like a tidal wave mistaken for a wave. Came not as a note, but as an octave, black-keyed and mangled, searching the hospice only to find she'd left without notice. The soul clapped from her body, masked by death. Death hiding death from death, and finding no sign of her in the high cheekbones and skin. Screwed off on a cough into the evening. 2. In the weeks between her death and being laid to rest, life became COVID-19. Both the living and the dead shared one air. Then the service came, and I was not there. I watched from the safe distance of an app as my mother and uncle, massed among the massed few in a pewless space, made peace with the orphans who'd come to take their place. Looking at them on screen was like looking out at the world through the bars of a cage. 3. And now, high on a slope near Van Cortlandt, the immortelles of perfect pitch sing Ina Harris to sleep. Her shade goes there to listen, bathed in the scent of ilex, palm, linden, kapok. It is Easter, and she is dressed in her lilac vest and hat her daughter crossed bridge and Bronx and plague to bring to her. She is 2 steps ahead of this pentameter as it follows her through the flexed valley of the shadow of death. This elegy, which, like all of them, is so useless and late. My grandmother saw it coming, and she left. The Peacock. Music for when the music is over is what a poem is. There's no music in a poem, just the imaginary composer breathing beneath the deep wreck. The curves of that glorious alphabet resilient as bioluminescence stuck in the seafloor. There's something to it. How poems pretend to sing. As a peacock pretends in the wide span of its plumage that there's no end to it. The far stars of galaxies and its ocelli gazed, and gazing as one. The first visions finally arriving at the listener who makes sense of it sooner or later. Tradition and the individual talent. I wandered through each chartered street till I was shot by the police. And finally, a poem called Mortality Ode. You know, we live in a world now of remixes, mashups, B-sides. We're made of other things. I think, as you can see as well, my poems have this sense of being made of other things, what they've lived and what they've read. Poems often take place in sublime spaces, the top of Mont Blanc, atop Westminster Bridge, staring out at the Pacific Ocean, or in a cell phone store, that great crux of humanity in these days. This poem is set in the latter. Mortality Ode. Waiting in the cellular store like waiting for bread, we see two NYC police cars pull up, casually, one behind the other. Two officers enter, two wait outside. One struts up and stops a few feet from the counter and leans forward like a dark blue crane. The person at the front of the line, over whose shoulder he makes concrete the coarse abstraction of his presence, doesn't turn. The woman behind the counter asks the officer for his name, which begins with officer. She tells him he's now in the system. She'll call him when it's his turn to make himself comfortable. The other officers come in then. They begin fidgeting with the phones on display and talk about those things they feel they can talk about, suddenly public in their public service, hemmed in with the rest of us cut from communication, worldless. I have no idea how much time has passed now. I don't have my phone. Well over an hour. I feel a creeping hunger. Anyway, one of them breaks away from the conversation for another compulsory round of seeming like he has something to do. Grim-waisted, he dawdles past the digital tablets and begins testing the weight of oversized smartphones and smartphones small enough to fit in a watch. His right hand hip high and resting on the pimpled, black, blunt end of his piece as he walks, like all of them, unbalanced but propped up by strange gravity, now visible. A monochrome, unearned elegance. He orbits us, curious for a moment about his future, about what will be in his hand when it's not reaching into a holster, when he checks the weather and wonders what in the world to wear. I watch him pass by the inventory on display twice before he slowly strides over to the glass window in the black corner of the store, where a solitary engineer tinkers with unresponsive hardware, clinging to life. He leans forward, the way his partner did, as though he is learning something, or remembering something, or being someone learning something, or remembering something, his right hand lifting from the dead metal and meeting his left on the blue ledge of the swing door, shut tight just below the window, locking his fingers together, arms akimbo, his badge now caught on the edge like a wedge. And then, just as it looked like his nose might touch the glass, the guy who's been helping me, who disappeared into those mysteries of the back, the shelves of stock, bouquet of crumbled stuff, the Shangri-La of the staff John, emerges from an unseen door and asks the officer if he can pass. Sure, the officer says, and the brother makes a beeline to me. My phone is finally ready. It took a while to transfer all the content to the upgrade, lots of data. But I'm all set now, he says. I turn the phone on. The black screen ignites, singing a single held passion note, a pretense of life, then stops, revealing my home screen. Everything I had before looks up at me now from the sleek mirage of short-lived newness, short-lived lightness, but it's pretty though. True. Thanks. The officers are reunited now, huddled like gum, close-knit but silent, their wall mended. I open my phone's camera to sneak a picture of them, because it's 4 cops in a cell phone store. I lift my phone nowhere near their direction, as though I'm simply testing its weight while straining subtly to center them in the aim. The blurs flame, then suddenly flare and come into focus when the guy who's been helping me, without looking up from his monitor, his hands still resting on his keyboard like hands holding the end of a net, asks me, his voice quick as a chimera, if I think I'll want protection for that. Because you never know. Never, ever know. Thanks.
It's a joy to share with you some work from my forthcoming collection with Faber. The poems in this collection are an exploration of love and the wounds that love makes. The first half is comprised of 5 sections that follow the trajectory of the arrows of karma, the Hindu god of love, desire, and memory. Much like his Roman counterpart Cupid, Karma also wields a bow made of sugarcane bark and strung with a skein of bees. In his quiver are 5 arrows, wreathed in flowers, mango, jasmine, lotus, and ashoka. Each arrow wounds, leaving a particular effect on the body. Stambhana, stunning, shoshana, withering, sammohana, bewildering, unmadana, intoxicating, and marana, destroying. The poem I'd like to read is called A Myth of Horses. It draws on varied cultural myths from across the world, including the Bedouin legend of the 5 mares considered to be the primogenitors of Arabian horses, Greek myths including Pegasus and the legend of the Trojan horse, Shiva's burning of karma through his 3rd eye, the Vedic ritual of the Ashwamedha Yajna, the horse sacrifice, and the legend of Agni Varavavaktra, the fire in the mouth of the mare that will eventually consume the universe. A myth of horses. Say a horse is a myth. As big a myth as the bigness of a foot or the tooth of a saber-toothed tiger, like a lion, feriform, social, carnivore, like a lie, extending so far as bone from a cornered mouth, long in the tooth, even when closed. Say a myth is a horse. Say a myth is a band, is a herd, is a harass of horse. Say we harassed a horse. Say we whipped it, kicked it. Say we broke it. Say we broke a horse. How would we put it together again? Say there were only ever 5 of horses, 5 of anything. Say we set them up, let them all loose, first tearing through their throats in a tortured desert. Gave them leave to find drinking right when they came in sight of that glitter-dark oasis. Pierced a whistle like a falcon bird of prey, hunting them down, calling them forth, commanding their return. Say only 5 of them did. Shall we call these Al-Khamsa, the birth of all horse on earth? Say a horse did not need water, for it could hit a fisted hoof upon any surface and draw blood like constellations. Say a horse did not need water because it had wings. Say a horse is a mount, is a fountain of life. Say horses were born to run, even though they were not. Say they sleep standing up, not lying down. Say they move towards pressure, not spurred on by pain. Say they shy away. Say a queen made love to a dead horse. Say a queen was made to lay down love with a slain stallion, stallion worth 1,000 cows, under the sign of Sirius 4-eyed dog's star. Say this horse flew like a bird over a kingdom, fleeing men, survived a whole year before being welcomed, bathed, ritually slayed by the king of men. Say the day that we burned the body of love, the flames wouldn't go out. Love was just a boy with a sugarcane bow and 5 flower arrows. So we put him in the mouth of a weary white mare and drowned her there beneath the waves, where she still waits with a doomsday womb, breathing bloody fire. Say a horse is not a horse, but a giant trap. Wooden war toy besieging the beaches of Troy. Soldiers armed to the teeth in the belly of the beast whose spice zone shut in its lips. Say a horse is a gift, don't look it in the mouth. Say a horse is the rift between us. Say we flung a spear, sprung a leak in its side, yet it did not bleed. Say that's why the bat-blind soothsayer died for saying, Ecco ne credite, do not trust the horse. Say riding a horse, for the horse is like feeling the jaws of pride of lion close around the flared boat of your throat, the lecherous grasp of a human predator grappling with your jugular. Imagine the horror as horse. And what if this lion could speak? Say we would not understand him.